It was late in the afternoon when Emma first realized she was lost. The Scottish Highlands were notorious for their beauty, but also for their treacherous wilderness. She had wandered far from the marked path, lured by the shimmering silver birch trees that stood like sentinels under the fading light of the day. Their slender trunks swayed ever so slightly in the gentle breeze, creating an eerie whisper as the leaves rustled above her. The deeper she walked, the quieter the woods became, as if nature itself was holding its breath. As dust settled over the forest, the sense of isolation gnawed at her. Emma's phone was dead, the battery drained hours ago, and there wasn't a soul for miles. Panic crept into the shadows grew longer, stretching like fingers across the forest floor. But then, just ahead, something caught her eye. Movement between the trees. At first it seemed like nothing more than a shadow, but as she squinted she saw it more clearly. Standing, barely 3 feet tall, it moved with an unnatural grace. Its clothing, or what passed for it, was made of leaves, twigs, and moss, blending seamlessly with the undergrowth. Its hair, long and dark, looked tangled with branches and dirt, as though it had been part of the forest for centuries. The figure's eyes glowed with a soft green, reflecting the last remnants of twilight. Emma couldn't tell if it was watching her with curiosity or caution, but the air between them grew thick, charged with a feeling she could not explain. It stepped closer, and she noticed its skin, dark as tree bark, and covered in patches of moss. There was no malice in its eyes, just an overwhelming connection to the forest itself, as though it was the guardian of these woods. For a moment, Emma couldn't move, trapped between awe and fear. The figure raised its hand, and she followed its gesture, noticing a hidden path that wound its way out of the trees. Without a word, the creature vanished into the undergrowth, as though it had never been there at all. The topic of tonight's episode is the Ghillie Dhu. The Ghillie Dhu, a name whispered in old Scottish folklore, is a creature like no other. It is said to be a guardian of the forest, particularly fond of birch trees, which is why its appearance are often linked to the birch groves deep within the Scottish Highlands. Standing no more than 3 to 4 feet tall, the Ghillie Dhu is almost impossible to distinguish from the natural world it inhabits. Its clothing, if you can call it that, is composed of leaves, moss, and twigs, allowing it to blend seamlessly into its environment, becoming part of the forest itself. Some people have even described it as more plant than flesh, with skin the color of the old tree bark and hair that tangles with the forest floor. In the lore of the Highlands, the Ghillie Dhu is known to be both protective and shy, avoiding humans at all costs unless they are in danger. It is said to take special care of lost children, gently guiding them back to safety. However, adults who wander too deep into the Ghillie Dhu's territory may not receive the same kindness. There are stories of travelers who claim to have felt the creature's eyes upon them, unseen but ever present, urging them to leave the sacred groves before they overstayed their welcome. The origins of the Ghillie Dhu are shrouded in mystery, though some believe it to be a fairy of the Seelie Court, a protector of nature who fell in love with the birch woods and chose to live among them for eternity. Others think it is a manifestation of the forest spirit, born from the earth and trees, with its sole purpose being to preserve the balance of nature. No one knows for certain, but all agree on one thing: to encounter the Ghillie Dhu is to witness the living, breathing heart of the woods. The Ghillie Dhu is the most active at dusk and dawn, the times when the forest is at its most serene, and the light fades to shadow. It is during these moments that the creature moves between the trees, watching over its domain, ensuring that no harm comes to the groves it so deeply cherishes. One of the most intriguing encounters with the Ghillie Dhu comes from a man named Duncan, a hiker from the Isle of Skye. Duncan had been trekking through the Highlands on a summer evening, taken in the beauty of the wilderness when he found himself lost in a dense forest, just as the sun began to set. He recalled the eerie silence that fell over the woods. No birds, no wind, just an oppressive quiet that made his heart race. As he searched for a way out, Duncan noticed something moving between the trees. At first he thought it was an animal, perhaps a deer, or maybe a fox. But as he moved closer, he realized it was something else entirely. Duncan described the figure as small, no more than 3 feet tall, dressed in what looked like a cloak of leaves and moss. Its skin was dark, almost as though it was part of the trees themselves, and its hair, long and tangled, appeared to be interwoven with twigs. But it was just as it was the eyes that haunted Duncan the most, glowing with a soft green light. They seemed both ancient and knowing, as though the creature could see deep into his soul. As it moved, it appeared to dissolve into the foliage, reappearing only when Duncan thought he had lost sight of it. The forest, which had once seemed like an endless maze, now seemed to open up, revealing a path Duncan hadn't seen before. He swore the creature was leading him, though it never spoke, never even made a sound. After what felt like hours, he emerged at the edge of the forest, with the figure disappearing just as quietly as it had appeared. Duncan was never able to explain what he had seen, but he knew, deep in his bones, that the creature had saved him from the endless labyrinth of trees. Second account comes from Elspeth, a woman who, as a child, had wandered too far from her village near Loch Lomond. She was only 10 years old when she got lost in the woods, drawn deeper by the promise of adventure and the lure of bright white flowers that dotted the forest floor. As the shadows grew long and the air grew cool, fear began to set in. Elspeth recalled the sudden feeling of being watched, the hair on the back of her neck standing on end as she realized she was not alone. When she turned, there it was, a figure no taller than herself, dressed in what looked like a suit of leaves. Its face was delicate, with soft, round features, and its skin seemed to glow faintly in the twilight, like a living part of the forest itself. Its eyes, though kind, held an otherworldly wisdom, far beyond the years of the young girl staring back at it. The creature extended a hand, and Elspeth, despite her fear, felt an overwhelming sense of calm. She followed it without hesitation, her small hand slipping into the creature's grasp. As they walked, the forest seemed to part for them, the trees no longer looming in on her, but guiding her towards safety. The figure never spoke, and Elspeth never felt the need to ask where it was taking her. In her heart, she knew this being meant her no harm. When they finally reached the edge of the woods, the creature released her hand and vanished, disappearing into thick birch trees as though it had never existed at all. Elspeth's grandmother, when hearing her story, whispered that the Ghillie Dhu had protected her that day, and to always respect the trees, for no one knew when the guardian of the woods might be watching. Another account comes from Liam, a woodsman who had spent decades working in the forests of Aberdeenshire. Unlike many others, Liam didn't have the good fortune of being saved by the Ghillie Dhu. One morning, misty morning, as he was out checking traps, Liam ventured deep into the grove of birch trees he had never explored before. The trees stood tall and silent, their pale trunks blending into the fog that curled around the forest floor. As he worked, Liam felt an unshakable feeling of being watched, like eyes were following his every move through the shadows. He shrugged it off at first, but then the forest began to, change. The air grew thick, oppressive, and the quiet became suffocating. No birds sang, no animals stirred, just the weight of the silence pressing down on him. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it. A figure, small and hunched, cloaked in what seemed like living foliage, was peering at him from behind a tree. Liam froze, heart hammering in his chest, unsure whether he was facing a spirit or a trick of the light. Before he could react, the creature darted into the underbrush with inhuman speed, moving like a shadow slipping through the forest. His instincts screamed at him to run. And he did. But no matter how fast he ran, the forest seemed to close in around him, the trees twisting and shifting as though alive, blocking his path at every turn. It was as though the very woods were working against him, preventing him from leaving. Liam claimed that, as he ran, he could hear footsteps behind him, soft but unmistakable. When he finally stumbled out of the woods, breathless and trembling, he swore he could still feel those green eyes watching him, even from a distance. Liam never returned to that part of the forest again, and to this day he warns others to stay clear of the birch groves at dawn and at dusk. Yet another haunting account comes from Niamh, an artist who had traveled to the Highlands to find inspiration for her next painting. She had set up her easel in a birch grove near the Glen Affric, entranced by the way the light filtered through the trees. As she painted, Niamh felt an unusual serenity wash over her, as if the forest itself was at peace. Hours passed, and as dusk began to fall, she packed up her supplies, only to realize she had lost track of time and had ventured far from her campsite. As the light faded, Niamh noticed a movement in the corner of her vision. At first, it appeared to be nothing more than a trick of light, perhaps shadows dancing among the trees. But as she focused, she saw the silhouette of a figure, small and ethereal, stepping lightly through the grove. Its movements were fluid, graceful even, almost as if it was part of the wind itself. The creature never came close, but it lingered just at the edge of her sight, watching her with glowing green eyes. Niamh described that feeling as both enchanting and unnerving, like she was witnessing something that no human was ever meant to see. When she finally made her way back to camp, she realized the forest had led her to safety without even realizing it. In her next painting, she captured the scene of the twilight moment, a figure wrapped in leaves and moss, hidden among the trees, its eyes glowing softly in the shadows. Each of these stories, while unique, paints a vivid picture of a creature that exists on the edge of our reality, one foot in the world of fairies and folklore, the other deeply rooted in the natural world. Some are saved, some are merely guided, and others are left shaken by their encounters. But all share that same chilling detail, the sense of being watched by something far older and far more powerful than any human could comprehend. Thank you for joining me tonight on Lunitar's Legend, Lore, and Lies. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and comment. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have your own tale of the strange or unexplained, send it my way. Who knows? Your story might just be in the next legend we explore. Till next time, stay curious and stay safe, my friends.